Good morning and Wednesday, everybody. This is Alex Bolin here, part of the Streamline management crew. And today we are going to be discussing a little bit of APM. But before we get into the APM aspect of things, we want to make a couple of announcements that we're super excited about. So, obviously, Streamline, right? That's why we're here. So, here are the meat and potatoes to Streamline 2025. February 25th through the 28th, Greenville, South Carolina. This year's theme: unifying data, connecting the enterprise. So we're real excited to share about how EAM can help connect the enterprise and how the enterprise can bring that into EAM as well and just bring all the data moving up to the front spot. So we're doing a few things differently for Streamline this year. We're adding a day and a half to the event, and we're going to be jumping in some workshops. So expect to see some agendas come out soon. And we're going to be hosting a day and a half full of how-to workshops led by various EAM experts. And it's going to be a day and a half of pure education after a day and a half of solid keynotes, not keynotes, but sessions, learning, hearing from one another. So this is going to be a rip roaring of a good time. So if you want to, go ahead and scan that QR code if you have time. That'll take you to the Streamline Conference website that we have. And as you can see on the bottom, there is the pre-registration and link, which is www.streamlineconference.com / 2025. And if you want to stay up to date on announcements from Streamline, if you want to put in a speaker opportunity, we're accepting speakers as well. We'd love to hear from you and see where you can fit in on that. So please visit the website, scan the QR code, jump on the pre-registration list. We're happy to start seeing you folks trickle in for it. One other small announcement about Streamline. So we are trying to evolve Streamline just a little bit. So we want this to be sort of an engagement piece throughout the year where we come together in February for an in-person event. So this is webinar number 1 of many to come, but we will be doing one free webinar hosted by Streamline for the remainder of the year per quarter. So we'll be announcing the next webinar probably within the next couple of weeks, what the topic is, who's going to be hosting it, and then obviously setting up the registration portion of that. So these webinars are completely designed to be educational. We're not here to try to give a pitch. We're not here to try to cram a sale down your throat. We're here to educate you guys as the end users and empower you to the best of your abilities. And then when we all get together at Streamline, we can continue to foster that growth and that education. And we're super excited about it. And we're super excited that you guys are here to join us. So without further ado and getting into it, I'm going to introduce today's guest speaker. That is Marc Laplante from the APM team at HxGN. He's one of the industry consultants. Marc and I, we've been, I would say, acquainted and working together for about a year now. He's been working with the DigitalThinker team for a little bit longer, but since the IDIS acquisition, we've been working hand in hand. And I joke, every conversation or meeting that I have with Marc, I walk away knowing that I absolutely know nothing. So I am incredibly humbled every time by Marc's knowledge of industry and how he's able to educate. And I'm just very excited for him to talk to us a little bit about APM, how it's done well, and how it's going to be able to help you out. So before I hand it to him, just one last thing. We are recording this. It will be posted on YouTube when this is over. And so if you weren't able to make it, or if you got to leave, or if you got folks you want to share this to later, we will have the YouTube link sent into your email inbox by the end of the day. Hopefully. Don't hold me to it. Hopefully. So without that, Marc, thank you for doing this. Take it away, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Thank you guys for
Sounds
being
great.
here.
Thanks, Alex. I'm very excited to be here. There is a Q&A feature in this webinar. I'd encourage you to use it. There will be a Q&A session following the majority of the slide presentation, so feel free to feed that inbox of questions as they come up, and we'll take the time necessary to answer them. If not by the end of the webinar, but certainly offline if you've got additional questions or things you want to discuss, or if you want to make any additional inquiries about Streamline, please feel free to use the Q&A box or the Q&A function for that specifically. So again, very glad to be here today. I'm in my just shy of my 30th year in the asset management industry, serving various forms of industry, and I'm and I'm really excited to be talking to you about APM today, and really the theme of APM done well. And so I'll break this down into 4 sections here today. In the first section, I'd like to jump right into it, and let's talk about the misconceptions of APM in the first place. APM has been around for a while, and I was recruited a number of years ago by a company called Meridian, which was acquired back in 2016, and I think that's where we laid the foundation for APM as an enterprise solution back then. What we want to talk about today is what APM is. It's not necessarily a piece of software, and so it's a process, not a product, being that first point. And I want to challenge you all to decouple the process of APM from the software applications being promoted to the market. So APM being a system of systems, or a number of processes that are applied to an asset management system. And believe me, I'm not opposed to software. I sell it for a living. But I also recommend that the software selection should be the byproduct of the asset management planning process. And so software technology has that important role to play, but is not in and of itself APM. So let's get that major misconception out of the way. The second misconception that I want to talk about is the topics associated with predictive maintenance. It's not about sensors and artificial intelligence, and there's a handful of sophisticated AI-enabled applications that help you take information you have to generate information you don't have and make predictions around anomaly detections and aspects of predictive maintenance. It's important to recognize that there's a lot of products that claim to be in the APM domain, which are in fact point solutions aimed at providing some sort of anomaly detection. And many of these fall into the category of predictive maintenance, condition monitoring, asset health, and these are processes and approaches that have been in existence for years. They are, in fact, important components of asset performance management, APM, but they not in and of themselves APM. So understanding where all of those fit and how they map to APM is very important. The next misconception that I want to put out there on the table is it's more than criticality analysis in RCM. It's an important component of asset performance management. The use of strategy development processes such as reliability-centered maintenance definitely have an important place. And again, these are things that have been around since before I was born, and I've been in my 30th year of asset management, and RCM predates that by several years, for sure. There have been also many papers written over the years that lament the lost opportunity to realize value from RCM studies. And so getting the RCM study done and completed is the first part. There's a number of reasons why organizations fail to realize the value that's created by an RCM study, and that is the process itself. Considering the process to be crossing the finish line once the study is done, where in fact most experts will agree that the conclusion of the RCM study isn't the finish line, it is in fact the start line. I don't have a dog in the RCM fight. I've facilitated RCM workshops. I'm a proponent of it. But knowing what you're getting ready for and what you're getting into, and understanding that once you complete that's the study itself, you've actually crossed a start line. So the investment and the time, the resources, the budget, if your organization is blessed with all three, those will only provide a return if the strategy that results from that study is implemented. In a word that I'll be referring to often here is operationalized. So strategy development is the first step. It's a recursive cycle, and this is where APM comes into full view. I like to explain APM using this ubiquitous plan, do, check, act model. And when APM is in place and it's doing what it's intended to, it maps to the plan, do, check, act cycle that in very specific ways. And the plan, do, check, act cycle isn't exclusive to APM. Most people on this webinar understand that. It can be applied to quality, it can be applied to operations, human health and safety, sanitation, depending on the type of business that you're in. Plan, Do, Check, Act can be applied to many different types of business operations and work processes. And so what we'll be getting into are the high level, the four principal steps of business process steps that are enabled by asset performance management and how they're mapped to Plan, Do, Check, Act. What I will ask you to do is remember the places around the clock, which I'll be referring to, the 9, 3, 6, and 12 o'clock, or 9 o'clock positions on the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle as I go through this. And so those are recognizing the principal misconceptions of APM and how we set the stage for building consistent and achieving rather consistent measurable outcomes with APM. And so let's start first of all with a definition of what is an asset. When you look to the ISO 55000 standard, and we've got a new one coming out here in the next couple of months, it should be published with full revisions. I encourage you to download that and keep up with the changes that have occurred in that standard. But we go back to the standard to define what in fact is an asset, an entity, item, or thing that has potential or actual value. And your job in your organization is to realize value from those assets in a meaningful, measurable way. And so when you think about asset management and other standards management system standards that exist, 9001, most people on this webinar will recognize that as being a quality system standard that ultimately protects your reputation. And when you think about another one, 14001, it's a management system standard that's in place to manage your environment management system and keep you from exceeding your budgeted impact on the environment. And so 55001 is a sibling to those well-known standards. It's an asset management system standard that ultimately protects your investments and the value you seek to realize from those investments. So should assets then be protected? Well, if you think about it, if you're saving for retirement, or if you're investing your income into income producing assets, should you then have the confidence to know that those assets are being protected against risk and are managed in a way that they continue to grow and deliver value? Well, the same principle can be applied to the assets that are in place within your manufacturing systems. They are there to help you to achieve your strategic objectives, and in that is realizing value from those assets. And one of the things that I look to when I talk about asset performance management is getting back to the question, what needle do you need to move? And asset performance management is in fact a view of assets through the lens of risk, cost, opportunity, and performance. And so let's get into a little bit more detail around that. When you look at the consistent measurable outcomes that you're looking for, here are some of the key value drivers that you can realize with asset performance management. Now, most of these you will see that other business processes and enabling solutions will point to these as well. But we're going to look at some specific examples of how you achieve results and outcomes with APM. A lot of them have to do with avoiding downtime and unplanned events. And again, I don't want anyone to get caught up in one of those misconceptions we talked about earlier. It's not about predictive maintenance in and of itself, or anomaly detection in and of itself, or detecting and avoiding unplanned downtime. Those are important components of an asset performance management system, but not in and of themselves APM. Understanding and optimizing maintenance spend, knowing whether you're over maintaining or under maintaining your assets is critical, and utilizing APM and its enabling capabilities is part of helping you to get that optimized balance between over maintaining and under maintaining to the level that you need to spend, and only that level. And then lowering operational risk, and that's going to be a key concept that we keep referring back to. And it's between the 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock position of the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, which we'll get into here once again. Understanding, first of all, what needle do you need to move? if it means increasing availability by 1%. What does that mean in terms of a business outcome? If it's about removing unnecessary maintenance cost, um, or it can be a combination of all of these things. Understanding what needle that you need to move is an essential part of developing your asset management or your asset performance management system. And again, we'll be going through this recursive cycle that you see here in a little bit more detail as we look at each of those individual components. And so, achieving consistent, measurable outcomes, understanding what needle you need to move, and how does the applicability of APM map to that business outcome that you're looking for, and the capability of asset performance management to recursively and consistently help you to aggregate the marginal gains that come from moving that needle in the right direction. And so let's look at section number 3 then. If APM were in place and working well, how would you know? And I think this is really at the core of what we want to talk about today. APM being done well. And what does that look like? How would you know if it was in place and it was actually doing what it was supposed to? Well, first of all, APM, when it's done well, it makes use of what you already have. In other words, one of the most common complaints among asset managers and the people that we engage with is that my data is not good enough to take this next step. And in fact, it's probably the fault of a lot of us software and solution vendors in the world by showing this as these steps towards maturity, from going from reactive to industry 4.0 and 5.0. Perhaps that's not the right approach. It's also the same as, but it's also the same as saying that, unhealthy person can't take the next step to improving the way they eat, sleep, and exercise. I think that's ludicrous. And so APM helps us to realize that we have more data than we think we do. It's in better shape than we think it is. And we're a great deal closer than we think we are to that desired future state that we're looking for. And we've got some examples that we can share with you. And this is the type of discussion that I like to have when I engage with organizations like yourselves. The second part is that it also leverages investments already made. When I was with IDIS before we were acquired by HxGN, we had engaged with a number of customers and subscribers, and be able to leverage the investments that they had already made. That is, they had significantly invested into an RCM study several years before they brought the IDIS application into their asset management system. We're able to fully leverage that RCM study that they had previously done and bring that into the APM environment. And so no matter how healthy your asset management system is, I'm certain you've made some investments in taking steps towards your desired future state. There may have been efforts that you've made in recent years by installing sensors and bringing in services and conducting studies or surveys or what have you, and using approaches like RCM and FMEA and FRACUS and PMO, among others. And so you should have the ability to associate life cycle activities, conditions, and vital signs with the intended care and feeding of those assets, to the intended outcomes of those investments that you've previously are actively making today. And the third point I want to make on when APM is in place and it's working well and it's well deployed, it provides visibility without what I call the burden. If your assets were athletes, we'll take advantage of the Olympic season that's almost ready to start. If your assets were athletes and you were the coach, what information would you need to have in front of you to enable your athletes to have the best chance of winning and bringing home medals, right? I often say that if organizations manage their assets in the same way Olympic coaches manage their assets, that is the athletes, I think these organizations would be running their asset management programs with a great deal more precision and molecular detail. And so the outcome for APM and all the information that you need to have in front of you should be aimed at safely maximizing predictable production at the lowest sustainable cost while observing the risk profile of your business or your organization. Keeping in mind all those athletes that are going to Paris here in a few short days, they all have the same objective, right? And so only having a recursive process such as this one, when APM is in place and it's working well, and having all the information that you need in front of you to be the difference between the ones who win the medals and the ones who go home disappointed is precisely what the difference that APM makes, particularly when it's mapped to this plan, do, check, act cycle. So let's go into a little bit of detail here. Let's look at the assess risk step, which is between the 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock position. When we look at assessing risk, we want to ask ourselves the question, if this asset or asset system were to fail to fulfill its function, what would be the worst case credible scenario? Would it kill or injure someone? Would it cause us to exceed our budgeted impact on the environment? Would it cause a significant business interruption that exceeds a certain dollar value? Would it put us at risk of losing a customer or customers? Would it put us at risk of deteriorating our reputation? And so these are we view assets through the lens of risk and the consequence of if they were to fail to fulfill their function. And so this is one of the underserved areas in industry today, in the asset management industry. And so looking at this first step and understanding what are the consequences of failure of our critical assets? What are the failure modes, the degradation mechanisms, the vulnerabilities to our assets, and to be able to view those as we seek to achieve those consistent, measurable outcomes. A couple of ways to be able to understand risk exposure. There's the qualitative means that many people on this call will be familiar with, using a risk assessment matrix. There's a lot of pros to being able to do that. It's a fairly simple process. It's intuitive. It can be rapid. It can be multi-dimensional. That is, you can look at numerous risk receptors across the same risk matrix, if you will. There are some disadvantages to it, of course. There is the subjectivity that can and bias that can infuse itself into the process. We're all human, and as instruments, the group of instruments needs to be calibrated so that everyone who pegs risk on a chart like this will peg it the same way. And so group calibration is really important to mitigate against subjectivity and bias. There is also the quantitative measure of risk, using information you have, that is your asset records and your order history, to calculate and achieve information that you don't have. That is, how much risk am I exposed to based on how often my assets have failed in the past, and what are some of the dominant failure modes and mechanisms and vulnerabilities that have led to those failures and the consequence that we've endured in the past. And how can we calculate that using a failure distribution? Those are the advantages, plus the computational resources in which we can dump a lot of data into a model to quickly generate some results. And we've got some great examples that we can share with you should you be interested in that. The disadvantage or the cons is that the source data accuracy and how that data is pulled together and able to be decomposed in an efficient way. We have techniques around that. We've got the ability to be able to vet that data and get it into a state where it's usable. We're certainly happy to tell you about those things. But the point we want to make here is understanding your risk exposure and then taking it to the next step, which will we go from the 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock and 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Let's protect against those failure modes, or those damage mechanisms that could occur, and those vulnerabilities. Understanding what do we need to have in place in order to sufficiently operate at a level of tolerable risk, and what investments do we need to make in those protections. And the chief protections that we have in place that are consistent with RCM is the activity-based protections. These are the things that you do, a senior operator or technician, the physical activities of checking, lubricating, tightening, and what have you. There's the condition-based protections, which I think are in two subcategories. You've got your condition monitoring, so you're looking at things like vibration, thermography, oil analysis, those types of things that you're examining for. You're looking for incipient signals of failure. And there's what I would call the vital signs. It's also a type of condition protection where you're examining things like speed, load, temperature, pressure, and how they interact with one another and how they may also produce signals of failure. And so this is important to understand that we have to know what our assets are vulnerable to, what failure modes, dominant failure modes that we need to understand in complete detail so that we can, in fact, be able to protect them adequately, and the sum of which helps us to operate those assets at a minimal, acceptable, or tolerable level. And we've talked about RCM and other types of capabilities or approaches that we use to develop strategies to help us to understand how much risk we're exposed to and what level of risk we need to get down to. Not all organizations have the bench, the budget, the patience, and the resources to invest in an RCM study or one of these larger comprehensive studies. I want to point out to the fact that there's a lot of commercially available and community of practice generated intelligence around asset strategies and what they should look like. There are such things such as ISO, ARITA. There's the CFOS standard. There's the IDAS Asset Twin Library. So if you desire to have an asset strategy to put it in place and ensure that it's working well, but you don't have the bench, the budget, or the patience, the resources to actually go through a formal study, you can select a strategy, season it to taste, put that in place that has all of the assets, the failure modes, the protections, and you can see in the bottom of the slide how many we've got several hundred asset twins that we have within the library. And then several thousand failure modes, protections, failure modes, and then the conditions and actions. And so I encourage you to look into that as well, should you not have the ability to execute, to prepare for and execute a formal study. So as we go from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, we want to ensure that once we've achieved that strategy, whether we've developed the strategy ourselves, through one of these formal studies, or whether we've selected a strategy and made adjustments based on how well we know we operate those, care for and feed those assets. We want to ensure that that strategy is in place and it's working well. That is, all of the activity-based protections are being done. We are changing the oil, we are tightening, we are cleaning, we are lubricating, we are doing the equipment walk down. So all the activities, you want to ensure that those activity-based protections are being done. We have compliance there. You also want to verify that when it comes to monitoring certain conditions, right, that all of these switches are in the on position. And so not only you want to be able to verify that the activity-based protections are being done, but also the condition protections are also being done. The ability to be able to display the failure probability of those assets and the individual failure modes along a mission time, and that the conditions that you're monitoring for, whether they be condition monitoring like vibration analysis or speed, load, temperature, pressure, vital signs, as I referred to them earlier, we want to ensure that as part of that strategy, those two are also being monitored. And as you can see on the bottom right-hand side of that slide, all the switches are in the on position, that you know that it's in place and it's operationalized. One of the ways that we also help to bring about this visibility, to be able to contain the consequence and the bad actors that contribute to the impact of your asset management system, is to be able to leverage technology. There is the opportunity to visually train a machine learning model as part of a protection, and have it continually learn and alert you to anomalies that are coming up. And this is particularly handy when you may not know the failure mode that you're trying to mitigate against. All you know is that my asset isn't performing, it's slowing down, or it's failing, or it's stopping at these intervals, and I've kept track of that information. Can you then train a model to look for those changes and those variances that lead to those outage events, or those slowdowns, or those failures or stoppages? Train that model to what good looks like, and to alert you when conditions go out of the threshold tolerances that you have in place. And so the ability to train a model without having to have a room full of data scientists, to be able to leverage what's in between the ears of your senior operators and your maintainers, is precisely how this training model is designed. I often have one of my mentors would often give during his workshops. He says, "We've got senior operators that walk around this plant that'll say, I could have told you that thing was going to fail 3 weeks ago if someone had just asked me." Right, so there is data in between the ears of some of these experienced operators, and this application is purpose built to be able to, what I like to say, squeeze their heads and to codify that knowledge and use that knowledge to train a model and to deploy that model into the wild and make confident predictions. Finally, as we get around the entire clock, we go from plan, do, check. We finally come to act. And this is the what I like to illustrate this process is you're not reacting anymore. You've gone through the process of developing an asset strategy in which you have contained all of the consequences of asset failure. And so you have a list of exceptions that you're looking for, a list of bad actors that you've identified, and you've got strategies in place to mitigate that level of risk to an acceptable, tolerable level. Sometimes things will come out of the blue, sometimes failures will occur, but part of this plan, do, check, act cycle is knowing which are the ones that we need to stay ahead of, to get ahead of and stay ahead of. And so be able to manage nonconformances and to be able to act and make decisions to remediate some of these bad actors. What I like to call it the process of making decisions decoupled from the analysis. And the simple illustration I like to use there is checking the weather app before you leave to see whether you need to bring an umbrella and a raincoat, right? All the analysis that has gone into helping you make that decision is completely decoupled from the decision itself. The other thing that I like to mention is that the application will then pull together evidence of all the anomalies that are being detected, and all the incipient signals that are being detected, and how often the asset data goes out of these threshold limits that you've established. Be able to collaborate with your asset experts, whether they be internal or external, to come up with a plan in a single space to collaborate. Remember that illustration I gave you earlier about, if your assets were athletes, would you and your coaching staff have everything in front of you to be able to make decisions on why athletes aren't performing at quite the level that you know that they can be, right? And so this is an environment in which you as a coach and your assets, your athletes, have all the data that you need in order to make those increasingly quality decisions, and to continually help your organization to compound its collective understanding about the care and feeding of those assets. And as I mentioned, if things do go wrong, and they fall outside of that list of exceptions, you have a recursive process that consistent outcomes and results, be able to act with more athleticism than you previously had before. And then finally, the level of visibility that you can gain from APM. And I think I'm approaching the conclusion of these major slides, and I'll leave you with an illustration. As I was watching my Edmonton Oilers in their valiant effort to win the Stanley Cup championship here just a couple of days ago, I know it hurts my heart. They almost did it, but fantasy leagues have this nailed. Perhaps the best way to illustrate asset performance management is, to use a sports analogy, which I already have been, but if we organized asset data to optimize balance, risk, cost, and performance the same way that we use player labs and lineup optimizers for daily fantasy sports gaming, manufacturing facilities would be operating and managing assets with molecular precision. And this is something that I would introduce into some of my workshops that I've done in my past, is that if you managed your assets with the same level of rigor that you manage your fantasy league selections, you're probably doing a great deal more, a great deal better than you are today. So if your assets were athletes and you're the coach, all the teams have the same objectives to bring home gold. And just like every other manufacturer that's out there right now, they also have the same goals of cutting unnecessary cost and monitoring asset health and being proactive, or even this word prescriptive, which I'm not sure what it is, but it may mean something to you. Be able to understand which assets pose the greatest risk, and to be able to contain those assets, the consequences of those failures, being able to track the wins and losses. And as you can see here, we have the ability to be able to say this this decision that we collaborated on helped us to achieve the savings that we were looking for, and hopefully those accomplishments far outstrip the losses, because you're not going to win them all, but at least you have a trail of data and decision support to help you aggregate marginal improvements over time using that recursive plan, do, check, act cycle. And so what I'll do then, as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with an important thought here. And if you forget everything else that I blabbed about here today, I'd like to leave you with this important thought, that you may be a great deal closer than you think. And I'd like to offer some simple but powerful steps to get you from where you are to where you desire to be. And I'll leave you also with an important quote from perhaps one of the foremost experts in the world on risk management, and that's Douglas Hubbard. He wrote a book, several books, but one in particular that comes to mind is The Failure of Risk Management. And I believe everyone on this webinar should be forced to read that book by Doug Hubbard if they want to. Quote that Doug is known for is to say, if you have a lot of uncertainty now, you don't need much data to reduce uncertainty significantly. And this is where the Streamline Conference really, really helps you get to that next level of what we'll call incremental maturity, or helps you to realize the value of the difference between your current state and your future state. And as a HxGN employee, part of that great organization and this great Streamline Conference, we're eager to help you light a path between where you are and where you desire to be, and to show you, oftentimes, most of the time, you're a great deal closer than you think you are. So forget about these big steps towards, Industry 4.0 from where you are right now. Put that aside for a while and walk with us down this path of understanding and knowing with certainty that you're a great deal closer than you think you are. And I'd like the opportunity to prove that to you. Some of the tools that we bring include the APM strategy library that I mentioned before. You may not have the bench, the budget, or the patience to actually do a formal study, or you want to learn as much as you can outside of that before you commit to doing a formal study like that, which I recommend you do. You can leverage things like the asset strategy library, and that the simple illustration I like to use is that if you need to bake a cake, you can either do it from scratch and assemble all the ingredients yourself, or you can get the Grudelli or the Duncan Hines off the shelf, and then you still have a cake, and you can put the red color icing and sprinkles on it if you'd like, right? And so maybe you want to take a step in that direction before you make the decision to invest a great deal more towards building strategies. Either way, your asset performance management system will be ready for you, so that when your strategies are in place, you know that they're working well and all the switches are in the on position. One of the tools that I want to offer you today is the Asset Risk Analyzer. If you haven't already, I encourage you to go to assetriskanalyzer.com. This is an opportunity for you to use your own EAM work history, your assets and order records, to show you, first of all, what asset risk are you exposed to, what opportunities that you have to be able to reduce that risk, and how does that What does that look like in terms of cost savings? It will also compare your existing asset records to comparison assets within the library to help understand which of your assets are underperforming as benchmarked against the comparison assets in the library. And oftentimes we've got a great customer story, a case study that you can read on our website that exposes a blind spot that the customer was unaware of, and using this application, which is free, they were able to expose a blind spot that they were previously unaware of. And that was the use case, the business case for taking APM to senior management to get their blessing to move ahead in installing an asset management or asset performance management solution such as IDAS. And so I'll leave that with you as well. I want to put the Streamline save the date slide for those of you who may have wandered in a little bit late and missed Alex's announcement of the Streamline conference. I hope to see you there. I made a number of new friends when I attended this year's conference. I intend to meet those friends again next year, if not before, and make a bunch of new friends while I'm there. Greenville's a great town if you're looking for somewhere to go in February. Not necessarily tropical, but it's a very beautiful town, and I encourage you to join us there next year. And I'll finish off by saying, please feel free to reach out. Reach out to me directly. This QR code is to my LinkedIn profile. I'd love to hear from you. Talk to your HxGN account executive or your services executive sponsor, perhaps. Reach out to them to ask them questions about asset performance management and then finally, of course, your post-implementation HxGN partners. They play a very important role in this ecosystem as well, and I encourage all of you to reach out to them as well if you have any amount of curiosity of APM and where you need to go. I would encourage you to reach out to myself directly, to us at HxGN, or to your post-implementation partners. With that said, I'll put it back to the Streamline slide and hand it over to Alex. Alex, were there any questions that popped into the Q&A that I can answer?
I popped one in, and it looks like we might have one here in just a second. But I wanted to clarify with you, Marc, with the HxGN APM tool and the free asset risk analyzer. Can anybody use that regardless of what system you're on? Like, I know a lot of us here are HxGN EAM users, but for those that may be on SAP or IBM, how does that work?
We have built loaders for those three, and they're not limited to those, but we do have a procedure for extracting functional location, equipment, work orders, and notification history out of SAP. We have a similar procedure for extracting necessary information out of Maximo, and of course, we've got the instructions to do the same with HxGN EAM. In fact, with the use case that I referred to earlier is Alyeska Pipeline. They utilize Oracle EAM, and we're able to get the mileage they needed to make that business case to take to management, extracting information from Oracle. So there is a simple process. It's a powerful process, but it is simple, and it is DIY. Right? Do it yourself. The instructions are there. They're unambiguous. And if you do need some hand holding, I'm always willing to help out and to get your data into the shape that you need to drop it into this very important tool.
Awesome. We do have one question from Junaid. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. He's asking, what, as an existing HxGN EAM customer, can we expect from the IDAS Global acquisition by HxGN?
Well, this is certainly what you can expect is a far more deeply integrated product into EAM. So between the EAM and APM, what you end up with, and if you look at that recursive cycle, when APM is in place and it's working well, it helps drive business process improvement in EAM as well. And EAM then, as the data improves from the influence of APM, generates more enriched data into the APM system. And so what that will do is the combination of APM and EAM helps an organization to enrich their asset management program and have their asset management system perform a great deal better. One of the things that I struggle with in the industry, and this has been the case for 30 years and beyond that, is that at the boardroom table, there is a permanent seat for quality. There's a permanent seat for human resources. There's a permanent seat for environment. There's even permanent seats being set aside for ESG and DEI. But to date, I've never seen an organization, or it's rare to see an organization that has a permanent boardroom seat for asset management. I would like to see that change. And so the global acquisition of IDAS APM into the HxGN family, what that does is it filled a gap that HxGN had in its EAM offering, and now you have a very powerful 1-2 punch of EAM and APM to help customers get to where they desire to be. And then, of course, we've got this global network of support, expertise, and the people who like our partners, our HxGN partners, people like our internal sellers and services people already have a really great understanding of enterprise asset management. Be able to leverage that knowledge and enrich it with APM will also bring a great deal more credibility and usability of the application and the support that comes with it. I hope that answered the question.
Fantastic. I hope so too. Well, looks like we got a follow-up on that. He says, can we expect the IDAS APM capabilities within EAM to be available this year? And will
Oh,
we be embedded as standard, or will it be an add-on module?
well, it's been the commercial model I won't I can't speak on, but it is a fully integrated product within EAM now. And so you don't have to wait any longer. In fact, a great deal of that work was done just prior to and during the transition of the acquisition. And so it's fully utilizable, fully generally available application to be used either with one of the aforementioned EAM products such as Maximo and SAP, but fully integrated and usable within the EAM, HxGN EAM application.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Marc. Well, again, as we wrap this up to a conclusion, apologize for stealing a couple extra minutes of your time this morning. Please visit the streamlineconference.com/2025 to get a pre-registration in so you can stay up to date with more information, more news, and more updates as we come about the event for next year and additional webinars coming up throughout the year. If you are interested in a speaking engagement or sponsoring Streamline next year, please visit the same website and fill out the form. Also, give us a follow on LinkedIn during the Streamline Asset Management User Conference page. We're happy to just keep you informed and stay up to date there. I want to give a huge thank you again to Marc for joining us today and putting in some sweat equity into this webinar and the just absolute knowledge that we've gained from it. So hopefully this was educational for you and you can take some stuff home and learn more. If you guys do have any further questions, you need help getting pointed in the right direction, as Marc mentioned, please don't hesitate to reach out to your HxGN rep. Or a implementation partner, or any of us here at Streamline. You can submit a request form, or you can reach out to me at alex.bolin@streamlineconference.com, and I'm happy to get you pointed in the right direction to make sure you have the right person to help you out. So without any further more, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Have a happy 4th of July for those in the United States, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Certainly.
Take care.